Hello, my friends. Welcome back. My name is Jessie, and Penny has consented to join us today. Today, we are going to be talking about earth sciences, which seems great because I love science and I love the earth, so what could go wrong? Let's find out together on today's episode of Science Will Save the World. So something you may not know about me is that I am a total rock nerd, meaning I'm one of those people that collects rocks wherever I go. And I don't mean like objectively cool rocks, but like rocks that I just super like because of how neat they are, that are special to me for maybe no reason. So I have some here to show you. I like this one a lot because it reminds me of like what a dragon egg might look like. This one's cool because it's like all spotty. I think it's some kind of granite. I don't know. This one's neat. It's real striped. Look at those stripes. It's so cool. What is it? Ooh, this one's kind of green. I like that. I found that recently. And look at this magical piece. This is only a selection of so many. Look at this magical one. It's like giant and it has these like crystals inside of it. Can you see them? Ugh, it's so special. So I don't know if you're a person who likes to collect rocks, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. One thing you might know, or maybe not, about rocks is that they're not alive, right? So rocks can't grow. They can't have babies. They can't even move from one place to another by themselves. But what they can do is they can change. And this process of changing from one thing into another thing is called the rock cycle. And we're going to learn all about that today. So there are 3 different types of rocks in the world. You ready for the words? Okay. They are igneous. They are sedimentary and metamorphic. I feel like I have to say it with an accent. I don't know why. So each of these rocks is kind of defined by the way it forms. So rather than describe them to you right now, I'm going to take you through the process with a hands-on experiment that you can try at home. And so I'll show you instead how the rocks change from one thing to another through the steps of the rock cycle. Okay? So if you want to try this at home, some things you will need. Crayons. Preferably crayons that you don't care very much about, i.e. we're going to be shaving them up and melting them. So maybe not your favorite crayons, but old crayons would be cool. Crayons. You'll also need some wax paper, some aluminum foil, and some sort of like a pencil sharpener would be great. If you don't have a pencil sharpener, you could use like a cheese grater, but actually I'd rather have you get a parent to use a cheese grater and make sure it's okay with them too, because it's going to leave wax all over it. So anyway, I recommend a pencil sharpener as your first choice. Something else you're going to need is a grown-up anyway, because the very last step of this process includes the oven. So I'm going to need you to have a grown-up-aligned person to use the oven for this. Okay, let's get started. It's going to be so fun. Okay, so I went ahead and did the first step, which is to pick out a few of my favorite crayons and unwrap them. So you're going to take all of the paper off of these crayons. These crayons, unwrapped crayons, are going to act as the first step in our rock cycle. So these are going to be igneous rocks. Okay, so at each stage, I'm going to ask you to stop and kind of observe and use your scientist senses to think about what these types of rocks are like. So something you need to know about igneous rocks, and we'll go through it in a second, but the igneous rocks are the ones that are formed by hot molten rock that kind of crystallizes and solidifies. So I want you to take a second and think about each one of these igneous rocks and describe it to me physically, okay? So for instance, I would say maybe that my igneous rocks are kind of hard. They're also kind of shiny, and they're all one color is something I noticed. There's not anything mixed up. They're solid colored. So that's where we're going to start. Igneous rocks. Cool. I'll show you the sign again. Igneous rocks. Okay, so as I said, we're starting with igneous rocks. And we're going to pretend that our unwrapped crayons are igneous rocks, which, just to remind you, these form by molten rock. Okay, so igneous rocks, and our first change on the rock cycle is going to be igneous to sedimentary. Okay, step number 1. So we're taking our igneous rocks, and I'd like you to also start with a square of wax paper, and you're also going to start with your pencil sharpener. Okay, so you're going to go one at a time and just sharpen these crayons. You're going to go one color at a time. That's important because a lot of times this next type of rock is formed in layers. So I'm going to do green first, and I'll do the other ones. I'm going to sort of speed this up for you so you don't have to watch the whole process, but just so you get it. Here we go. So here, what's happened is the igneous rocks, these hard solid ones, have been transformed into these little fragments by a process we call weathering. So weathering can happen by air, it could, or by like wind, it could happen by water. And so it's just the process of a type of rock being worn down and broken into pieces by nature, right? So this is how weathering happens. And so weathering breaks that rock into these smaller parts. We call them sediments. So here we have all of these sediments together, you see? And so over a lot of time, these sediments are turned into sedimentary rock. And so what happens is sedimentary rock they're formed by pre-existing rocks that have been broken down into tiny particles. These are sediments. And so when they settle together and sort of harden, sometimes there'll be like this liquidy stuff that gets in there and kind of cements them. And that makes them into sedimentary rock. And often, if I'd done a lot of this, you would see that it's kind of stripy. So there's like the sedimentary rock kind of gets stuck together and cemented together. It's just the weathered pieces of another type of rock is sedimentary. So as you can see with movie magic, a lot more sediments have been weathered off here. So sedimentary rock again is just rocks being weathered into little bits called sediments and then kind of getting cemented and stuck together. Okay, the next thing that's going to happen is this sedimentary rock is going to change into what we call metamorphic rock. And so metamorphic is a big word, but if you think about it, it's kind of a similar word as like the word metamorphosis. So if you think about the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly or like a tadpole turning into a frog, same thing, right? And now metamorphic rocks are going to be formed by heat and pressure. So if you could imagine all these sediments going underground in the earth, and so we're going to fold up this wax paper. They're underground in the earth where it's hot and where there's a lot of pressure of all the other rocks and stuff on top of them. So my hands are going to simulate the heat of the earth. So I'm now pressing down and letting the heat of my hands kind of warm and compress so we can turn this sedimentary rock into metamorphic rocks. And so now after I've applied pressure and heat with my hands, we can unwrap it and take a look at this metamorphic rock. So you'll see maybe that it's in little pieces. So maybe your hands are warmer than mine or your pressure is stronger. But each one of these little pieces is then a metamorphic rock, which has been created by heat and pressure, pushing, crushing that like sedimentary rock together. Cool. Metamorphic rock has been transformed by heat and pressure. Time to do our very last change. Now, finally, we're going to go metamorphic back to igneous. Okay, so metamorphic to igneous, the thing you're going to need to do is get a piece of aluminum foil. I folded mine in half, and you're going to fold it into a little boat-like thing. Okay, so I'm just going to you want it to have sides, and I recommend also for the next step putting it on a cookie sheet. So here's my little boat with sides, and you're going to pour all of your metamorphic rocks. Looks like I have some sediments in there too. You're going to pour them all into your little boat. So here's where you need the grown-up-aligned person. You're going to put this into a preheated oven at 250 degrees for 5 minutes, okay? I'm going to go do that. And so our very last step was to turn the metamorphic rocks that we made into igneous again through the process of melting them completely into magma. So remember we put our first we shaved down the crayons. So we started with the igneous rocks. We shaved them into sediments, which then got compacted into sedimentary rock, which then got transformed by heat and pressure into metamorphic rock. And then they underwent melting. Are you ready for this? Oh, it's alive! And this is our magma, which then what happens is this is where you need a grown up also. It doesn't just melt, so it melts into magma, but then it kind of reforms. So my magma is going to pour into this shape where it can then harden and recrystallize. And so that crystallization is what makes it into an igneous rock. So I've used a bottle cap here as a mold to show you how it sort of will take a new shape. And I've added a little grease too. So just like a little oil in there to make it not stick. So I'll be able to take out my new crayon later. So that then is the igneous rock. So here's something that's really cool about the rock cycle that isn't true of life cycles of living things. Because again, remember, rocks aren't alive. So if you're a living thing, like a frog, right, there's only really one direction of your life cycle that you can go. You are born out of an egg, and then you're a tadpole, and then you have to grow up into a frog. And once you're a frog, you can't be like, I changed my mind, I want to be a tadpole again, right? That's not how it works if you're alive. But if it's not alive, like a rock, then there's lots of different ways it can go. And so the way that we practiced it in our little hands-on experiment, that's not always the way that the rock cycle has to go. So the igneous rocks, we talked about igneous rocks, the ones that are formed by heat, that are formed by magma crystallizing. We talked about igneous rocks weathering into sedimentary rocks. Sure, that's true. Weathering, so like wind and water and stuff, can break a rock down into little parts, which will then be cemented into a sedimentary rock. Cool. But guess what else can happen? A metamorphic rock could be weathered into a sedimentary rock. A sedimentary rock could be weathered into a different sedimentary rock. Do you see? But that's not all. A sedimentary rock, we talked about it being, but through heat and pressure, being turned into a metamorphic rock. Sorry, I spilled some igneous rock on my metamorphic sign. It's fine. You understand. So we talked about heat and pressure turning the sedimentary rock into a metamorphic rock. Sure, that's true. That can happen. But also, what if that's upside down? An igneous rock through heat and pressure could be turned into a metamorphic rock. Are you getting the idea now? So all kinds of things can happen. Not only that, we talked about metamorphic rocks, the ones that are formed by heat and pressure, then being melted and crystallized into an igneous rock. But, and I think you can see where I'm going now, right? Metamorphic rocks, yeah, they can turn into igneous rocks. Guess what else? Igneous rocks can also be melted back down and turn into other igneous rocks. The sedimentary rocks, once they're started to heat and pressure, they're going to turn into a metamorphic rock first, I think, and then they'll turn to igneous. But yeah, you get the idea. It's like a big circle. Everything can turn into whatever based on the conditions, based on if it's weathering or if it's crystallization or if it's heating, cooling, pressure, whatever, right? So rocks are magic. That's what I want you to understand from today. And crayons are fun. And I don't know, what else is there to get out of this? That's awesome. The rock cycle rocks. And I hope you learned something. I hope you had a chance to think about every different type of rock we saw, or pretend rock, to think about what it looked like and felt like. And I hope you have a better understanding of the rock cycle after today. One more thing. I have a book recommendation. This is best, I think, for ages 4 to 8, but it's a book I really like. It's called Everybody Needs a Rock by Bird Baylor. And it's just about how important it is to find your own rock and to keep it for yourself. And I'm a grown-up and I like this book. So I think that's a fun one if you want to go further. So once again, I'm going to include in the information below this video, I'll include some links to pictures of the rock cycle. I'll include some links if you want to do a little more reading about the 3 different rock types. And I'll include some definitions of the vocabulary that igneous, metamorphic, sedimentary, they're like great vocabulary words. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. See you guys. And go find some rocks, really.